Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Small businesses generally rely on teams, but when those teams sour, it can have a corrosive impact. So how do you spot a toxic culture emerging, and how do you deal with it? And is it possible that your own leadership may be the cause? Workplace culture specialist Colin D Ellis has answers to these questions and offers some tangible advice, because all too often it starts at the top, as he explains to Jeff Waters.
Well, toxic cultures arise, Jeff, when senior leaders permit employees to behave or perform poorly over a period of time. That's the way that I would categorise it. Toxic culture should never be a surprise, and the warning signs are there very early on.
So what sort of behaviour are we talking about?
You know, it can be as simple as micromanagement. I say simple because most managers aren't actually trained on how to be managers. And often what we do is we promote people based on technical expertise. So the default is to tell people how to do it. So toxic cultures can arise through micromanagement. They actually make the media when it's bullying, harassment, or any kind of physical or sexual aggression.
And how can we tell if this is starting to emerge in our workplace?
Well, usually there's a dip in productivity, there's a dip in morale. Usually there are whispers in the corridors that people pick up on. Often HR will be dragged into a meeting or asked for their advice on, how they can manage a particular situation. But that's not to say, Jeff, that every allegation of toxic culture it's true, but I think it's incumbent upon senior leaders to investigate those allegations to kind of find out whether there is anything behind them or not.
And what can they do once they find or once they hear these allegations of bad behaviour?
Yeah, so this is the real challenge, I think, Jeff. Certainly in the work that I do, what I find more often than not is that managers don't have the skills to be able to deal with the behaviours or the performance as they arise. They're not very good at setting expectations. And so as a result, what happens is it's very easy to get off track. Expectations around behaviour, expectations around performance. And when someone isn't delivering and they're not having the conversation, then as we say about leaders, you're only as good as the behaviour or the performance that you choose to walk past. So really at that stage, it requires intervention from HR, who will probably see it as a management responsibility to document conversations, have the courageous conversations, and look to help people to reset those behaviours. But as we know, Jeff, that can be really, really difficult to do, especially if we've allowed someone to behave or perform in a particular way for a period of time. So it really demands a lot of courage to deal with a toxic culture. I think if it's spread, that behaviour, then it really does need a reset. And often that's what people will employ me to do. Or people will buy the book, I suppose, and look to the advice that they need to actually reset the culture and begin again.
Forvis Mazars, audit, tax and advisory firm, is global to see the big picture and local to understand it. Move forward with Forvis Mazars. Visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.
When you're talking about productivity decreasing and you're talking about HR departments, first of all, you've got to be able to measure your productivity and have those metrics, but also where a small business is concerned, there won't be an HR department. Are there any specific tips that you can give to small businesses that have fewer employees and where a toxic culture can have actually a larger impact?
Yeah, so I always say to smaller companies, and I worked with one not so long ago, 30 employees, is that the leaders have got to role model the behaviour and the performance they expect of everybody else. And so that's one way to mitigate the risk of toxic culture, is for leaders to be the best versions of themselves, for them to understand what it takes to build great culture, and also what it takes to role model what, kind of what they expect from everybody else. Where they've got a toxic individual, it's to have a zero tolerance approach. Now, by that, I mean, what you're always going to do is start with empathy, find out what's behind the behavior or the performance. That's always got to be the first thing, is how can we help you to get better? This is not the behavior we expect of you. What can we do to help you change or reframe the behavior? So always empathy first. Make sure you keep a good audit trail of the expectations that you've set and the conversations that you've had, in case anything ever goes to litigation.
And of their behaviour, one presumes.
And of their behaviour, Jeff, yeah. You want to make sure that, there is sound, solid justification for you taking action against that individual. But, I always say learn from the best cultures in the world. You only have to look at someone like Netflix, where it's 3 strikes and you're out. You don't get a 4th chance. You get 1 chance for us to help you, a 2nd chance for you to help yourself, and then by the 3rd chance, there's a letter in your hand and thanks for coming. And, this is what really great workplace cultures do. And it doesn't matter whether you're a large global multinational like Netflix is, or a 30-person dental surgery in Queensland. If you allow those toxic behaviours to permeate, they can kill the business.
And of course, the smaller your business gets, the more the impact can be.
The more your impact can be, for me, and I spoke to a CEO of a small business this morning, one of the things that I said is you have a perfect opportunity to actually spend time together to define the expectations you have of each other, both from a behaviour perspective and a performance perspective. And at that point, you've generated a level playing field, you've created the foundations for really positive, good work. And that's when you can start to measure productivity. Let's have a look. We've all made an agreement on our culture. Are we hitting our targets? Are we getting through our deadlines, whatever it might be? And so that's the perfect opportunity to kind of make a statement at the start, reset the culture, and away you go for the rest of the year.
So it sounds like a lot of the responsibility would fall onto the manager or the owner to, number 1, lead by example, and then number 2, approach misbehaviour or problematic stuff with empathy and an open heart. Is that a good summary of what you're saying? Yeah,
I would say that's a good summary, Jeff. I think what employees always do is they look for leaders to take the lead on culture. However, culture is everybody's responsibility. Everybody plays a role in workplace culture. It's the leader's job to make culture a priority. And toxic culture is every organization's biggest risk today, because not only can it damage results, but it can also damage lives, and it can also damage reputations. You only have to look at a company like the Confederation of British Industry in the UK, which almost went bust and is still trying to repair its reputation 2 years on. And so I think senior leaders making culture a priority is the first thing to do. And then if you get a toxic individual whose behaviours and performance is spreading, empathy first, but then, kind of make sure that you cut the head off the snake and don't allow those behaviours and poor performance to spread.
And sometimes, just once or twice, that manager or owner might discover that they're the toxic one.
I always say, Jeff, that if you think you've got a toxic culture, take a look in the mirror first. Are you the root cause of that? And I spoke to a guy not so long ago who lost control of his emotions frequently. And he actually said to me, he'd read a bit of my book, and he said, I actually think I am the problem. And I said, just explain a normal day. And he explained it. I was like, yeah, I think you could be the problem. And so that's the first thing to ask is, are you either kind of too aggressive in your approach, or are you too nice? Sometimes people don't want that. What they want is someone that's direct, straightforward, on the ball. What we're not looking for is a family. We already have a family. People go to work, and they're looking for good direction, to be part of something they feel that they belong to. And at that point, they feel they can bring their best self to work, and then they look above for role models who are doing likewise.
That was workplace culture specialist and author Colin D Ellis. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.